Imagine a sickness that medicine cannot touch. A lingering darkness that follows you like a curse. In the ancient world, this darkness had a name and had a powerful counter-magic. Welcome, listeners of Veritas Antiqua. I'm your host. Today we journey together into the depths of the Hittite Tunnawi ritual to uncover the secrets of this ancient myth. We're stepping away from the usual records of, treaties and grand palaces. Instead, we are entering the low-lit, intimate space of ancient healing.
And it's a really crucial shift in focus. The Hittite Empire, for all its military power, was profoundly concerned with the invisible wars.
The ones inside the human body.
Exactly, the ones waged inside the human spirit and body. We're looking at a system designed to treat, well, the most terrifying enemy of all, internal corruption.
And that internal corruption was actually codified. It had a name.
It did.
When someone suffered from inexplicable bad luck, chronic infertility, impotence, or just a persistent illness, the Hittites called this crippling state Papratar.
Papratar is the absolute core of this entire ritual. It's not just sickness. It translates more directly to pollution or dirtiness. And what's fascinating is how comprehensive this pollution was. It was simultaneously a physical disease, a theological indictment, and even a legal transgression.
So the diagnosis wasn't just that your body was failing, it was that your soul was contaminated.
Yes, precisely. If you were afflicted by Papratar, you were carrying a spiritual debt.
So the assumption was you must have done something wrong.
You or your ancestors, yes. You must have broken an oath, or offended a god, or failed in some required duty. The suffering itself was the proof of the transgression.
Which raises the question, how do you treat something like that? Something that needs a medical cure, a spiritual cleansing, and legal absolution all at once.
You don't call a doctor.
You call Tunnawi.
You call Tunnawi. The old woman, the wise woman. And she was not a temple priest. This is important.
Right, she was an independent
ritual expert, a professional healer who operated outside of the official state cult. Her very existence suggests that in these moments of personal existential crisis, people turn to specialized knowledge, the kind she provided.
A true master of her craft, a kind of healer witch whose authority was so respected that the ritual itself was named after her.
Tunnawi's words.
Tunnawi's words.
Yeah.
She offered a tangible solution to what was a complex internal spiritual emergency.
And this is where we can really start to unpack the ritual itself. Tunnawi's entire method is founded on what the sources identify as the bedrock of all Hittite magical practice.
And that would be the principle of analogy.
Analogy, the belief that similar heals or destroys similar.
So how does she use that? How does Tunnawi make an intangible spiritual disease tangible?
Well, it requires a very controlled environment and some carefully chosen props. The ritual almost always begins in an isolated place, often by a running river.
And that isolation is key.
It's critical. If the patient is contaminated by Papratar, that pollution has to be contained. It cannot be allowed to spill back into the community.
So the stage is set for a kind of sacred drama. Tunnawi arrives, and her tools are, well, they seem deceptively simple.
Very simple. Black wool, white wool, and a small sacrificial animal, maybe a lamb or a piglet.
These are the physical anchors for this spiritual transfer.
Exactly. The wool, in particular, becomes the vessel for this deep psychological fear. The invisible corruption needs a visible container before you can do anything about it.
So Tunnawi initiates the ritual. She approaches the patient with the black wool.
And she touches them with it. She's effectively transferring that invisible burden into the physical object. Then she begins to recite her powerful, small story.
The storiola.
The short narrated myth that gives the ritual its transformative power. And this small story is the key piece of, you could say, psychological manipulation.
Because she doesn't just treat the wool as a symbol.
No, not at all. For the purposes of the ritual, she treats it as the actual contamination.
She holds the black wool up. And she asks the patient to look at it, to really observe its nature. She defines the darkness so clearly.
The words are so powerful. Look at this black wool. It is dark. It is dirty. This is exactly how the curse, the sickness, the anger of the gods, and the sin from broken oaths are gathered inside this man. Pitch black.
She bundles everything together.
Everything. The physical ailment, the divine wrath, the moral failure. It all gets condensed into that single image of blackness.
So the patient doesn't have three different problems anymore.
No. They have one unified, concrete entity that they can visualize, that they can hate. And by accepting that the black wool is the totality of their spiritual contamination, they're already halfway to being cleansed.
And the action has to follow the analogy. Tunnawi gets rid of the wool.
She discards it, she might burn it, or she might throw it into the river, but the darkness is given a vector, a path out of the patient's sphere of influence.
The sources really emphasize that immediate physical action, right? The burning or the casting away. It validates the internal transfer.
It makes it real. The pollution, now residing in the wool, is removed from the realm of the living. But as you said, you can't just remove darkness, you have to replace it.
And that's where the white wool comes in.
Introducing the concept of absolute purification.
The spiritual renewal.
The completion of the cycle. She just reverses the analogy she created. If the black wool was the visualization of guilt and sickness,
Then the white wool is the promise of health and innocence.
and she makes a direct promise of spiritual and physical luminosity. Now, just like the whiteness of this wool, the inside of this man shall be pure. Let his soul shine, let his body be light.
Such a powerful, tangible assertion of wellness right after that moment of expulsion.
This whole symbolic drama moves the patient from a state of, total existential crisis, the blackness of Papratar, to a state of potential purity. But Tunnawi's expertise doesn't stop with simple symbolism.
There's another layer to this.
There is. The ritual contains a much more visceral, physical metaphor, that is. Well, it's perhaps the most unique aspect of her practice.
And this is where she stops being just a spiritual cleanser and becomes, quite strikingly, a midwife.
Precisely. The unique power of Tunnawi's ritual lies in reframing the sickness. It's not merely corruption anymore. It's a living entity that has grown inside the body.
So the patient isn't just suffering an illness. They're in a difficult, dark, internal labor.
Yes. The sickness is personified. It's treated as a biological burden that has reached maturity and now must be expelled. Tunnawi assumes the role of a midwife, tasked with birthing the evil, the wickedness that is stuck inside the patient's physical being.
And think about the agency that gives the patient. The problem isn't abstract anymore.
No, it's localized. It's ready to leave. By framing it as a birth, Tunnawi gives the expulsion a recognizable natural process. She provides the patient with a physiological roadmap for how the pollution will finally exit their body.
It's an exorcism, but delivered through this powerful medical metaphor.
And the words Tunnawi uses during this expulsion phase are incredibly forceful. She's establishing her authority over the body's internal landscape.
She directly addresses this idea of blockage.
Yes, the idea that the internal paths of the patient, maybe physical, maybe psychological, maybe spiritual, are shut off, preventing natural flow and healing.
She becomes a spiritual surgeon, almost, demanding passage.
Her words are the paths blocked? I will open them. Just as a midwife opens the birth canal, I open the blocked paths in your body. Let that evil, that sickness, exit like a child and leave.
The implication is just massive. The Papratar isn't just contaminated wool anymore. It's a malignant growth that needs to be pushed out.
Exactly. The belief here seems to be that the contamination, if you left it unchecked, would follow a natural cycle of growth. It would turn into something that physically occupies the patient. Tunnawi forces that cycle to a premature, violent conclusion.
So once that evil entity has been symbolically pushed out of the patient's body, it can't just dissipate into the air.
No, absolutely not.
It's been forced from the human host, but it's still a negative force. It needs a definite destination.
This is the crucial stage of transfer. If the pollution remains in the mortal world, the whole ritual is a failure. It would just find the next vulnerable host. So the transfer needs a designated, powerful container.
Scapegoat.
The scapegoat. And this is where the sacrificial animal, the small sheep or piglet, fulfills its role.
The sin eater.
The sin eater. Tunnawi rubs the animal over the patient's body, actively transferring all that accumulated dark energy.
So the animal absorbs everything.
The totality of the contamination, the blackness from the wool, the guilt from the broken oaths, and that expelled entity from the birthing metaphor, it becomes, in essence, a walking vessel of Papratar.
But the animal's final destination is not an earthly temple or some ordinary altar.
No, it's fixed deep in the mythological geography of the Hittite cosmos. The animal is offered to the ruler of the depths,
The underworld sun goddess.
the underworld sun goddess, and this final destination provides the ultimate seal of protection for the mortal world.
Why her, specifically?
Because she is the absolute antithesis of the light and purity that was promised by the white wool, she reigns over the darkest, deepest realm.
So the contamination, which is by its very nature darkness and dirt,
must be returned to the primary source of all darkness, where it's contained and governed. The animal, now bearing the full weight of the pollution, is placed in a pit opening toward the underworld.
sealing the Papratar away so it cannot return.
The symbolism there is just. It's profound. The ritual doesn't destroy the darkness, it simply redirects it back to its original cosmological home. It ensures that the patient, now cleansed and purified, is fully separated from those forces of contamination.
And the final washing of the patient at the end, that's just the final punctuation mark on this complex internal reset.
It is. Tunnawi's ritual is so much more than ancient superstition. It's a highly structured system that provided deep psychological relief.
By making abstract fears, illness, guilt, divine anger concrete, giving them a physical form that could be managed and expelled.
It really reveals how intricately the Hittites wove together physical health, moral obligation, and cosmic order. Tunnawi was the expert who could navigate that entire system.
Guiding the light back into the deepest, darkest corridors of the human soul. These small mythological passages, Tunnawi's words, they paint such a rich picture of a people who took their internal struggles just as seriously as their external wars. They really do provide a window into the profound ways ancient culture sought to understand and defeat the invisible enemies that plagued them. I hope you've enjoyed our journey into this mysterious world. If you like this episode, please consider sharing it with a friend. Until we meet again next week to follow the trail of another ancient legend, take care.